So this tutorial is going to allow us to create a pointer that emits from our controller, and then use that pointer to teleport our player to different parts of the VR space. And that's really good because remember, if you're in room scale where you get to walk around in this space with a true headset, you can only walk as far as however big your space is, and you don't want to run into a wall or something. So if you're making a room that's larger than your office or your dorm room or whatever, you know, teleportation is one great locomotive solution for VR. There are other locomotion strategies too, but teaching teleporting through VRTK will allow us to see at least the basics of how you get movement in an accessible way for most VR headsets and gear. Now, the first thing that I want to do as I start this is yet again some more cleanup. Every time we do a tutorial, we make a mess in our hierarchy, and I think it's useful to organize a little bit. So we're gonna create an empty game object, rename it, and I'm gonna call this VRTK setup, and I'm gonna put the camera setup inside it and twirl that closed, and then I'm gonna put our controllers maybe under something that we'll call input mappings. That's going to be childed under VRTK setup as well, and the open VR controller mappings will go under that. Ah, look how clean it is. This is great now. Okay, so cool. We have a relative blank slate to get going. The next thing that we need to do is follow along with our how-to guides on the VRTK Academy. We are going to make a pointer first, and then a teleport locomotion. So we'll start with pointers, and we're going to do a curved pointer. This is basically a choice. I think curved pointers look a little better and have become a little more standard for teleporting. So we'll start there. Basically what we're going to do is use a button action like we made last time for turning on and off our light to turn off and on this pointer, and then later we will have a selection button that has our player teleport to wherever we pointed with the pointer. So the first step is to go into the packages, which is here if you don't have it twirled open, and then VRTK prefabs if you don't have that twirled open, and then we're looking for pointers. So twirl that open, or actually just click on that one, and then inside we're going to do object pointer curved, and I'm going to throw this into our VRTK setup. So we've got the pointer. And then if you click on it, you'll see in its inspector there's this script called pointer facade, and we have to hook up a number of things into this to make this work. So anytime you need to hook something up in Unity, it usually tells you what it's expecting. So it needs a game object here that is the follow source, and that means what is this pointer going to follow? It's going to follow our controller. And specifically, it's going to follow our left controller because I made our right controller our flashlight. So we're going to go into our VRTK camera setup and the tracked alias and the left controller, and let's drag that left controller alias into the follow source. Then it's going to ask for an activation Boolean action, which we learned how to make last time. It'll also ask for a selection Boolean action, and that selection is how we're going to end up teleporting. So let's start, however, with the activation. So we need another empty game object. This is going to be, we'll call this teleport button. And teleport button needs a component added to it, Boolean action. It's going to have two sources, just like we did last time. And we're not going to have to do anything with activated or deactivated here. We're simply going to drag this into the activation action of the pointer facade of object pointer curved. So that's all hooked up. The only thing we haven't done is say which buttons are going to do it. So now I want us to go into those input mappings and grab the left controller this time, outer face button, and under there we have this press 3 action. That's going to become element 0 in our teleport button. And we're also going to grab some equivalent from the simulated camera rig. So we'll grab button 2 from the button control under input mappings. This is the right click of the mouse, and this is just going to allow us, if we're testing without a headset and controllers, to try to mimic the action of the teleport. Okay, so with that done, I think we should be able to test. All right, so there's my left controller. Right one still has that flashlight on it. If I hold the left controller button now, I've got that curved pointer that we made. And what I eventually want to do is, if I let go of the button, I want to teleport to the spot I was pointing at. But right now, it doesn't do anything. So that's our next step. Now, by the way, for those of you who are working just with the simulated camera rig, if you test this out and hold the 2 button on your keyboard, you should be able to see a somewhat successful curved pointer. And the reason I say somewhat is on mine, I'm finding it will only show the curved pointer in invalid places. That is to say, where there's no floor. Like when you point way out of the sky, it'll show up. When I point at the floor, it doesn't show up. And I kind of scratched my head over that a long time off screen while I was preparing this tutorial. It could be my fault, but I kind of think that it just doesn't totally work with VRTK right now. But fear not, the teleport still will work, and it still is validly pointing at the floor, because I've tested this all and it does actually end up working. So we'll see ultimately if there's any way to make this functionality even better in simulated camera rig. But for now, if it does this, you're on the right track. So escape, and then hit the play button to stop playing, and we go back into edit mode, and we're going to add a teleporter. So I still am, if you like to see it in text form, I still am following along with the VRTK Academy, and we've achieved this. We've done it all. So the next thing we're going to do is make a teleporter, and that's under Locomotion, adding a teleporter. The There are basically two kinds of teleporters that VRTK can give you. An instant teleporter is literally a, blink and you're there. Dash is a very fast advance forward to the spot. So like you're the Flash from whatever he's from, Marvel or DC. Oh no, all the comic book fans are mad at me now. But yeah, it's like a really fast move. So you can choose. I feel like I kind of like Dash. It just feels a little more embodied to me. But if it bugs you, then choose instant. But I'm gonna grab Dash, and so this again is under packages, then VRTK prefabs, and then Locomotion, teleporters, and I'm gonna grab Dash and throw it in here, and I'll put it as a child of VRTK setup. Dash has a couple of settings that need to be hooked up as well. It's looking for game objects as the target and the offset. Now, the target is the play area, and we have an alias for that under tracked alias. Under aliases, there is a play area alias. Play area alias. And this is what we're moving, essentially. We're moving the entire play area. So you might think that, if you had any sense of what target meant at all, like, oh, what's the target of the teleporter? I guess it's like where the thing that we're teleporting. So that's the player, right? So maybe it's the camera rig, or maybe it's their head or something. But in VRTK, the logic is we want to move the entire play area because it contains the player, and if the player is in the middle of their play area, they're going to expect to still be in the middle of it when they teleport. If they're on the far edge of it, they're going to expect to be still on the far edge of it. So anyway, we're going to do play area, and then this offset handles the fact that the headset is likely in not just the center of the play area. So we're going to put the headset alias under offset. And if that's confusing or just seems like counterintuitive, just follow along with the VRTK Academy steps, and it'll just tell you which things need to go where. You don't necessarily have to memorize the logic of this. It kind of goes on at length about why this is the way it's done, but that's the way it's done, so do it. Finally, here is a section called camera validity, and this, to my understanding, helps deal with the simulated camera rig issue that we have more than one camera. So again, under tracked alias and then aliases, there is a game object called scene cameras, and that's what goes into camera validity. That should be all that we need to set up under teleporter. We can now go back to the object pointer and do the last thing that we didn't get to before, which was the selection action. So what I've decided I want to do is when I press my button, I want to see the pointer of where I will go, and when I release my button, I want to go there. There's another way to think about it. You could just have two separate buttons. You could have the button that you press to point, and then a separate button that you press to teleport. But I'm going to do this deactivate method. And so what that means is we're going to drag the teleport button as the selection action as well, but say that we're going to select on deactivate. So what this means is that our teleport button, remember, was just a true or false statement about whether button 3 on a VR controller or button 2 on a mouse are being pressed, right? true or false. Are they being pressed? And then here on pointer, we showed the pointer if they were being pressed. And then we're going to select if we deactivate, that is to say, if we stop pressing those same buttons. If you want to do this as a completely separate button, you know, you've got your logic says, oh, I should have a button for pointing and then a whole separate trigger button for teleporting, then you would do select on activate, and you would make a separate proxy action game object that uses the button that you're using as a trigger for teleporting. Throw that one in here. That's how they do it actually on VRTK Academy. I just feel like in a lot of VR software and games and experiences I've used, it ends up being the deactivate method. So that feels more standard to me. Okay, so we've done this, we've done this. The only thing we have left to do is down here say what selecting actually does, right? So we've said, you know, this is how you select, but we never actually said what selecting does. List is empty, so we're going to hit plus, and we're going to grab that teleporter as our game object, drag it in here, and under function, we're going to go down to teleport facade, and the very first action you see there, teleport, that's what we're doing. That's the action that will occur when we select. So, time to test. Left controller, I press the button and hold it to point, and then I let go, and I have teleported in a dashing motion to that location. Okay. If that dash doesn't feel fast enough for you, because I don't really feel like it feels fast enough for me, you can go under teleporter dash, twirl it open, and in inside the internal, twirl that open, and under dash movement, you'll see way down here, transition settings, this transition duration. If you make that shorter, then you'll get there faster. So I think this is like 1/4 of a second. I'm going to make it, you know, whatever, 15% of a second, and then try again and see if I don't like that a little better. Yeah, that feels a little more normal to me. So, like I said, if this rushing forward is jarring to you, just use the teleporter instant instead of the teleporter dash. The last thing we're going to do is prove what I was saying earlier about the simulated camera. Even though we don't get the pointer, we do get functional teleporting. I have to say, though, again, this isn't a perfect implementation. Because at least the way I've hooked it up, just pressing my button, not releasing it, sends me off and running. So it's not, like I said, a perfect one-to-one representation of what's happening in the headset. This could be me not yet understanding all the particulars of what VRTK's simulated camera rig expects, or it could be the simulated camera rig doing something peculiar, because all of this software is constantly being updated and worked on. And if I find out that I'm doing it wrong, I will update these tutorials. If I find out that VRTK changes something, same deal. But for right now, at least, those of you who do not have headsets at home, you can, you know, move your mouse around. In this case, with what we built, you can sort of guess at where you're pointing and right-click, and it'll take you there. Again, not perfect, but much more like what the headset experience is. And then, you know, if that's driving you nuts to move around that way in sort of guesswork, you can still just use WASD in the simulated camera rig to move around your world. I just think that it's important to set up some kind of headset locomotion solution, because if I'm in a room that's only this big, you know, in the real world, I can never get all the way over to see that beautiful tree without some kind of artificial locomotion solution. So the next thing I'm planning to make tutorials on is interactable objects, making things able to be picked up or what have you with the controllers. But between now and then, what I'd love you to do is, if you've been following along so far with our tutorials, maybe you have a world that looks an awful lot like mine. You know, maybe you even downloaded the same assets that I did just to make sure you were following along really well. My assignment now for you is, you know, leave this this one alone, you know, so you can keep following along with us if you'd like. But as we move forward, I want you to start making your own world in terms of its aesthetics and its layout. And these structural elements, you know, can be part of its how you navigate it. But you are doing the design and the layout and all that stuff. So under the scenes folder, you've got the current scene that you're in. Save that, and then select it and Control D and duplicate it. So now you've got this tutorial scene saved, whatever you've done on it. And then when you make my scene and open that one up, you can be so bold as to click that entire world thing and just ditch it. Start over. You know, make what you want to make. Because all of this stuff for VRTK will still function. So if I make a floor again, you know, zero it out, 30 by 1 by 30, and go into my headset. I've still got my controllers. I've still even got my flashlight, and I've still got my pointer and my teleport, right? So all of that stuff that is the sort of interesting world that we're building, that's up to you. You know, you should go through the asset store, find stuff that speaks to you, and start building your set your way. But now we have a way to think about how to navigate around this space and interact with it. And if deleting the world was too bold for you, you know, you can Control Z back to it and just delete parts of it, you know. Maybe you don't want any of my assets, but you do want the floor or the whatever, you know. And if you screw something up, that's why we duplicated our scene, right? You can always jump back to the tutorial scene and it will not be changed so long as you always make sure you're in the correct scene. If you really think you might start getting crazy and are afraid you'll delete something, you can back up Unity projects by going into the file structure of your Mac or PC. Wherever you saved it, there's a big giant folder that is your whole Unity project. Copy paste that somewhere else. And then you've got a copy of it as is before you start messing with it and potentially breaking it. Okay, I will see you all again next week.